And then this is an interesting one, I think, that professionals discussed whether it was legitimate or legal to ask parents not to use physical means to discipline. In this case, there was some very clear physical abuse that people were observing. Neighbours had observed this. People had seen the way that he'd been treated by his mum and her partner. And so in this country, reasonable punishment is allowed. It's not against the law. So professionals were saying, well, if they are, if his mum or her partner are hitting him, smacking him, physically contact, then it's probably legal. But actually, it's not legal if it causes any kind of wounding, any bodily harm, either actual or grievous, or child cruelty. And as we've already seen today, if you're talking about emotional abuse, making a child feel frightened or that they're in danger, then that is abusive. So actually, spending time thinking about, should we be asking him not to hit Alfie or not, is largely immaterial, really, isn't it? Because in this particular case, certainly, and in Scotland and Wales, where it's already been banned hitting children, giving children the protection that adults already have from being hit, this was one which was, I think, really crucial. So when we look at the Clare's Law, this is the one we're talking about. This is the Domestic Violence Disclosure Scheme, as it's more properly known. You can make an application at a police station, or it can be done online, and it may reveal a history of domestic abuse or violence to others. So it should reveal those convictions, those historical convictions. As with all of these different things, as long as the police don't feel that it's not within your best interest or keep you safer from harm. So that's Clare's Law. Another one which sounds similar, which is a bit different, is Sarah's Law, and this is known properly as the Child Sex Offender Disclosure Scheme. And to do an application for this, you have to have a specific person in mind, So some people try and use this Sarah's Law, and incidentally, they're not laws. Either of these aren't the law. This is just a sort of tabloid title for these things. But some people have tried to ask the police, for example, are there any paedophiles, living within 5 miles of my child's school or something like that. You can't do it in that way. It has to be about a specific person. Again, you can do it in person at a police station or online, and these checks may well reveal any history of child sexual offences, or indeed any other risk to a child from another reason. Now, the police aren't necessarily going to tell you what their checks reveal. They will talk to the person who is best placed to keep the child safe. So, for example, you may be a neighbour who is concerned about someone who's living with a child on the opposite side of your street, say, but if there is something to be found, it won't be you probably that the police will talk to. It will be the child's mother, to be able to work with them to keep the child safe. So that's Clare's Law. That's the Domestic Violence Disclosure Scheme, and the other one is Sarah's Law, which is the Child Sex Offender Disclosure Scheme. When there are these very serious cases, there are often common features. So an adult in the home who is controlling, violent, and deliberately using bizarre and cruel punishments when children can't meet their unreasonable demands. So these aren't the ordinary sort of punishments that parents give to their children just to correct their behaviour. These are really sort of bizarre and cruel punishments. In one case that I remember from a few years ago with a 14-year-old boy, the mum's new partner was making him go into stress positions that are banned in the Geneva Convention for prisoners of war, for example. So we're using all these different kinds of controlling, violent punishments Often food is used in a way to be to harm or frighten or emotionally scapegoat a child, restricting food or making the children watch while other children eat better food or have treats, or the adults have nicer food. In another case of Arthur Labinjo Hughes, some of you might remember that case from 4 or 5 years ago, when the ice cream van came, all the other children in the family were allowed to have an ice cream. Arthur was not allowed an ice cream, and not only was he not allowed the ice cream, he had to watch while the other children ate their ice cream. So really a hideous treatment, cruel treatment of this child, and that's a particular example of scapegoating. So we might notice this in school, for example, where there are siblings from the same family who appear to be, well fed, well dressed, clean, well looked after, and another child in the family appears to be none of those things, to be sad or unhappy or not have the best clothes, like his siblings do. So we often see scapegoating a particular child. Often there's limited access to the to other people, including school. Of course, lockdown was a very key feature of that for a number of serious case reviews afterwards. Children most often die when their schools are closed for the holidays, for example. And during lockdown, there were 36,000 fewer children's social care referrals. And that just shows us the importance of the school referrals. So the work that you're doing, the things that you're observing, noticing, hearing, listening to, recording on your CPOMs or My Concern or on record cards, this is what's driving the care of the children and reducing the impact. And perhaps most common where children die through these cruel situations, what we notice is that there's a delay in accessing medical support. So Alfie Steele, that I talked about, he was killed in the bath. They didn't phone them, the paramedics, very quickly at all. It wasn't until sometime later that they called an ambulance. And sometimes you notice them presenting the body in a way that fits the story the adults want to tell, sometimes even going to the extent of taking them out of the home. So there was a case of a little boy in Wales, in South Wales, called Logan Mwangi. His parents, after he died, took him out of the house and dumped his body in a river to try and explain away his death by saying that he'd wandered out during the night and fallen into a river and died. This is the very busy Manchester Road in Bradford. Late on the evening of Tuesday, the 11th of August 2020, there was a tragic collision that left Malachi, a 7-year-old boy, dead. The driver of a black Toyota Prius, high on drugs, had driven dangerously around Bradford during the evening. As he drove down the Manchester Road at 10 p.m, well over the speed limit, he collided with a 7-year-old boy crossing the very busy junction. In trying to identify the injured child, police found a mobile phone lying damaged on the ground. Detectives matched the phone to its owner in a street some 300 metres away. As officers arrive, they find the front door open, but the house is in darkness. There's no one at home. Police are later to discover that Malachi was deliberately left at home without electricity or gas, whilst his mother visited the home of her partner some distance away. She'd left Malachi with her mobile phone that was found at the scene. At her later trial for neglect and abandonment, she told the court that she'd not expected Malachi to be able to draw back the bolt on the door to get out. Jailing her for 3 years at Bradford Crown Court, recorder Tahir Khan QC told the mother, "This is Category 1 harm. In my judgment, the deliberate act of leaving Malachi alone and vulnerable resulted in his death. The local safeguarding partnership looked into Malachi's background and published a safeguarding learning report in 2023. The report found that Malachi's family had been known to children's services long before he was born. There are a number of learnings to be taken from this report. At the time of Malachi's death, Ofsted had graded Bradford's children's services as inadequate. The inspection identified a number of systemic failures, and many of the issues that led to the judgment impacted on the support that Malachi and his two older sisters received. There'd been a number of referrals to children's services from a wide range of agencies: schools, police, adult mental health services, and the ambulance service. On at least two occasions, these were about leaving the children alone in the home overnight. Perhaps the most important lesson to learn here is that children's voices were ignored, and the mother's explanations for the disclosures were listened to in preference to the words of the children, in particular Malachi's oldest sister, who was 13 at the time of his death. Malachi's sisters told the Safeguarding Review's authors that the children felt badly let down by services. They were most concerned that professionals didn't seem to notice the terrible conditions they were living in or their frequent changes of address. Although their mother threatened them with being split up if they were taken into care, the children feel that adults could see how neglected they looked: endemic head lice, starving, unhappy. Despite mother's threats, the girls did make detailed disclosures about being left at home overnight without an adult, being hit by both their father and mother, leading to visible bruising, and that mice were eating what little food was in the house. Although the girls feel that the school didn't notice the neglect and emotional and physical harm they were suffering from, school staff had actually made a number of referrals to children's services. But each time, mother's explanations were accepted and too much emphasis was given to mother's own needs. And it seemed impossible to get the case moved from early help to a child in need or even to a child protection plan. Mother struggled with her own mental health. She was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. She had alcohol addiction and a history of domestic abuse from a controlling and coercive ex-partner. The practice review said that the family had been designated as early help soon after the initial contact, and this seems to have become a fixed idea that was hard to shift.